Happy Tuesday. It is Tuesday, June the 11th. It is the 163rd day of the year. There are 203 days left in the year 2024. And welcome to another edition of Tuesdays with Tom. Well, let's see. The NBA, finals of the National Basketball Association tournament. There's no LeBron. There's none of the usual prospects. It's fun to watch this next generation lead their way into the public's eye. Last year was the Joker. This year is Luka and Kyrie and the Boston Celtics, who are beginning to look like the Boston Celtics of old, the Larry Bird days. We'll see what happens in the next 2 days, but right now it looks as though Boston is maybe the better team. Speaking of scoring, you probably have some idea about your credit score, but did you also know you have a driving score? Driving scores are based on how often you slam on your brakes, speed, look at your phone, or drive late at night. Information that likely, without your knowing, can be collected by your car or apps on your smartphone. That data is sold to brokers who work for auto insurers. These scores can help determine how much drivers pay for insurance. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Basing premiums on how you actually drive rather than credit scores and whether you're married or been to college could be a much fairer system and maybe improved road safety. Speaking of road safety, a man drove into a ravine, wrecked his truck in a ravine, and his dog, who was traveling with him, ran 4 miles to get help for him and bring people back to rescue him from that ravine. So let's see. Our G-list guest today is Diana Roman. She is the Chief Operating Officer of My Black Ancestry and a descendant of the largest slave-owning family in American history. She is the author of her upcoming book, The Nine Epiphanies on Race, which unravels the complex fabric of America's past, and we certainly look forward to that conversation. Our show today, of course, is sponsored by the Best Girl Consulting Firm. So let's hear from Best Girl.
Best Girl is a consulting firm that provides customized leadership, access and inclusion, public relations, communications, and organizational consulting services. Clients include Fortune 500 companies, utilities, higher education institutions, small businesses, and associations. Best Girl's team of consultants, led by Joyce Gilly-Gossam, Emily Hedrick, and Sean Jones, partners with business and education clients to promote organizational effectiveness, communication, motivation, and leadership, with always an impact on the bottom line. Best Girl's customized consulting services include strategic planning, corporate communication, executive coaching, fundraising, and economic development.
Best Girl customizes the solution that fits your needs. So let's get to our roundtable regulars, Barbara Wallace Edwards and Michael Walker. See what they got going this morning. Good morning, Barbara and Michael. How are you?
Doing well. Good morning to you.
All right. So, Barbara, lead us off. What you got going today?
Well, Tom, I'm looking forward to attending the Steel City Jazz Festival that's coming up this weekend here in Birmingham, Alabama. That festival is being presented by Empowerment Inc. We had Cedric Allen on the show with us a couple of years ago to talk about it, and this is their 10th year anniversary for the show, and they got some big names coming up. Ben Tankard, Eric Essex, Marcus Anderson, Norman Brown, Boney James, who's one of my favorites, Eric Darius, Marion Meadows, Gerald Albright. I think a lot of people are really familiar with him as well. And then on Sunday, there's an all gospel. This is the first time they've actually had a Sunday show included. And so we have all gospel that day, including some of the big names: Ernest Pugh, Byron Cage, James Fortune, and Yolanda Adams will close out the show on Sunday night.
Is it all outdoors?
It's all outdoors, yes. Downtown Birmingham, yes. So hopefully the weather will participate. I know it's going to be really hot during the day, but events will be at night. It'll start Friday evening at 4:00 and run until probably midnight on Friday, and then pick up again Saturday. Saturday will start at 12. So I don't think I'll be out there at 12 o'clock in the 96 degree heat, but it will actually pick up again on Saturday around noon.
Well, it may even rain. So
It's a possibility. I did check. I've been checking the forecast, and they said there's a slight chance of rain on Saturday and Sunday, but there's not a large chance. So hopefully that will continue to be the forecast for the weekend.
We hope so, and hopefully it'll be a lot of fun. And
yes,
you guys enjoy yourselves.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm talking about the heat outside. There's the heat wave moving across the country. I think last week in California, the temperatures actually reached like 112 degrees. So experts are warning people to really be careful in watching themselves in the heat to make sure they stay hydrated. So I ask all of our viewers to please be careful if you're spending an enormous amount of time outside. Wear cool clothing. Make sure you're drinking plenty of water. Beverage, any type of beverage is important, but definitely water, because you're probably sweating a lot, spending time outside. To avoid heat exhaustion and heat strokes, make sure that you're drinking properly and getting proper rest coming in and out of the sun. You don't want to spend too much time out there.
Sounds good. Michael, what's happening with you, man?
Well, just a lot of different things going on in the news, but we here, for the most part, that live in metropolitan areas and what have you, we kind of take it for granted that we can walk down the street to the corner market, or just kind of walk and pick up some things and come back, go to a convenience store. Well, that's not the case for a 45-year-old mother of 4 that went missing on Thursday night while she was walking through the woodlands to sell food at a market in central Indonesia. Her husband became suspicious after finding his wife's belongings in the forest and spotting a 20-foot-long python with a ballooned up belly. The man identified along with his wife by their first name. It is believed that the python bit her on the leg and then coiled around her body and suffocated her before swallowing her whole. And the man just could not forgive himself because he said he allowed her to go to the market to sell food by herself. And had he been there, he would have been able to protect her. And, that's just horrific, knowing that there are people that are still living. You read and hear about prehistoric times and how cavemen and stuff were having to fight off all these dangerous animals. We still have that going on today. And this lady was only 45 years old with 4 kids and a 20-foot-long python that
She didn't see him.
That's what I'm thinking. Really?
Yeah, I don't know, especially for him to bite her on the leg and he's 20 foot long. How do you miss that? But unfortunately for her, that's what happened.
Where she was walking, I guess.
Right. And I've never seen a python move. I mean, would they move slow? Something that large? Or are they moving pretty fast like most snakes, I guess? I don't know.
Well, that's hard to say. That's a good question, Barbara. You wouldn't imagine that a python that's 20 foot long, it's got to at least weigh 300 pounds or something like that. It's not more.
Right.
But apparently, and I don't know this for sure, but apparently they can wrap around you sneakily. Is that the word? But you don't feel them. And I don't know if that's true, but that's just kind of some of the stuff I've read over the years.
Really? That they can wrap around you and you not even feel it, kind of sneak up on you and do that?
Yeah, I think they can sneak up on you. I don't know.
Oh, wow.
That's weird.
I don't want to get that close to one to find out.
The villagers helped and they caught the snake and then they cut it open and found her inside his belly.
Oh, goodness.
So he swallowed her whole, or she, whatever it is. I don't know whether it's female or male, but the snake swallowed her whole.
Wow.
I read a story this morning about this man and this woman. They divorced, and it was not a pleasant divorce. And the woman woke up one night and there was a man standing in her bedroom. She didn't know who he was because he had on a Batman mask and he had a thing that distorted his voice.
Oh, wow.
And sexually assaulted her. He beat her the whole nasty bit. And about halfway through it all, she figured out it was her husband, her ex-husband.
Oh no!
Who had thought,
Wow.
who had been trying to get back with her. He kept,
Mhm.
we can get back together. We can get back together, kind of thing. And she wouldn't do it. And so he disguised himself as Batman. Came in. She said she woke up and he was standing there in the bedroom.
Oh my gosh!
And he thought this was a way to, he thought this was a way to get her back with him.
I don't think so. I don't know. Maybe his tactic was, let me scare her, and she'll want to be back with, get back with him. I don't know. That's
I don't know where he got that logic from, but
terrible logic. Terrible logic.
He's pretty lucky she didn't have a gun beside the bed.
Well,
And he got
that's
shot.
what I'm thinking. That's
Yeah.
what I'm thinking.
Mhm.
And the kids were in the house,
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. He was,
Wow.
I guess he was desperate. I don't know.
I
Yeah.
guess so.
It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
quick.
Let me share this with you guys. The pandemic caused all kind of havoc, and we're still feeling some of the repercussions, hence the inflation and all the stuff now that's going on with the economy. But there's a company here in Atlanta, you may have heard of them, called Cabbage. And they were a financial technology firm. And what Cabbage did was they enriched themselves by $190 million by collecting processing fees, helping 310,000 people file for fraudulent PPP loans. And so this has now been discovered. They're going to have to pay back the federal government about $120 million in a fine. And it is one of the largest in history that the federal government has been able to catch of people filing fraudulent claims. And this company was founded in 2008 here in Atlanta, Georgia, on the promise of making quick loans to small businesses, and sold its technology and most operations in 2020 to American Express. So now American Express bought them, and then they went and committed this fraud. And so they have filed bankruptcy, of course.
Of course.
Well, remember correctly, didn't they forgive most of the PPP loans?
They did.
Yeah.
I thought, yeah. So,
Yeah. It was the PPP loans that were forgivable. The EIDL loans, you had to pay them back at a lower interest rate. Yeah. So, I mean, process all these fake claims. So they had to know they were fake claims.
Yeah. Sounds like they knew.
Yeah. The company had to know these were fake claims, but they wanted that $190 million they got for charging these people these fees. So evidently they were helping them process the claims, charging them a fee for making it happen and getting the money. They probably taking a percent out of everything they got. To make $190 million, that's a lot of processing.
yeah. Wow.
And how much you say they're having to pay back, Michael?
120.
Why not all of it?
I have no idea. That doesn't make sense to me either.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And America's favorite mayor. You remember Rudy Giuliani? He used to be America's mayor. It is ironic how far he has fallen. Over the weekend, Rudy was at a Christian rally, a mega church, and was a guest speaker. And, he's had to file bankruptcy because he badmouthed and lied on these two African-American women in Atlanta regarding the election. And I think they got a judgment of, I don't know, I want to say $100-something million or whatever. Yeah. So he's had to file bankruptcy, but he kind of blames that on Fonnie Willis because she helped prosecute him. So while he was at this mega church, he referred to her as Fonnie the hoe.
Wait a minute. Say that again.
At a church, he did what?
I said at this mega church rally for Christians, he, was a speaker, and he gets up and he starts to talk about this, and he referred to Fani Willis. Her name is Fani, and it's pronounced Fani, but some people call her Fanny. So he said he is going to call her Fanny because her name, her spelling is not associated with the way you pronounce it. So he's calling her Fanny, and he says, I'm going to call her Fanny the Hoe.
The hoe?
Yes, you heard me correctly. H-O.
I just wanted to make sure.
First of all, I want to know what mega church had him on the agenda to speak.
Well, not only that, the people cheered after he said what he said.
Wow. Well, that's where we are in this divisive atmosphere.
Yes, it is.
I read something yesterday. This woman who I went to high school with, I think she's Egyptian, but she's from over in the Middle East. And one of the guys that went to high school with, as a matter of fact, played on the basketball team. Wasn't very good, but he does a lot of posts on Facebook that because he's in favor of Giuliani and that whole crowd, Trump and so on and so forth. So he posted something about how things were unfair and they were being unfair to Trump and all this stuff and so on and so forth. And now my friend, who I went to, the girl who is from Egypt, she says, Lord, we're going to have to pray for him because he doesn't have good sense, and we all know he doesn't have good sense. So we're gonna pray for him, and hopefully he'll come around. Oh, she wore him out, man. Got on her side. He didn't say nothing else. He just
Of course not. What could he say?
It's ironic that we talked about the former president, and his polling is going up. He's getting a lot of supposedly support from African Americans, especially rappers and people of that genre. You wonder why they are really supporting him, but he's really gotten their support. And it looks like he's going to get a break in court because the case in Atlanta, Georgia, has been put on hold indefinitely, as well as the case with the secret documents from the White House have been put on hold. So it looks like with that being put on hold, it'll go past and after the election term. So it's kind of being set up so that he could run and get reelected, and that'd be put on hold, and then he'll turn around and pardon himself.
Well, yeah, he may do that, but I don't. These polls, the polls to me depend on what questions they ask.
That's right.
And I don't believe that for 1 minute that these young people, young African American people, are lining up to support this man. I don't. I'd like to see the poll.
Yeah.
I really would. Don't think so. So one more thing before we go. Caitlin Clark, she didn't make it on the Olympic team, and it's controversial for some people. Your buddy Stephen A. Smith, the women on the NBA show blasted his ass. So what do you guys think about the whole Caitlin Clark thing? Is she being treated fairly or unfairly?
I think she's been treated fairly. She's only been in the league, a couple of weeks now? So if they're basing it off her NBA play, I think they're treating her fairly. She's actually been elected as one of the alternates, I think, if they need additional players. So that's fair to me.
Okay. Michael?
I agree with you, Barbara. I think she's really been overexposed and overhyped. And because of that, and maybe unjustly so, viewed as the savior of the league, so to speak. And I think all that did was set these expectations really, really high for her. And at the same time, it probably fueled a fire in her competitors and the other players in the league that feel like they have been there and they have put up good numbers and have played very well. And now all of a sudden they're chopped meat, chopped liver, whatever. And I think that she gets everybody's guarding her. She gets everybody's A game. And I think it's a lot tougher for her because of all of that. And, and then at the same time, she's trying to live up to those expectations. I think she's pressing. So, and I'm going to tell you something. This Olympic women's basketball team, they're stacked. And you have some good players in there, okay?
Real good players.
Yes. Yeah. They're stacked, So I don't think, even had she made the team, it would have been like, you remember the dream team and Christian Laettner? He was a college player that made the dream team. He wasn't going to get any playing time with a team full of Hall of Famers,
Right.
So I would liken it unto that. If she had made the team, she'd been the last person on the bench when you have all these other stars that are ahead of her that have been playing so well.
And I agree with both of you. When you're on it and you play basketball, when somebody comes new on the team, especially if they're a younger person and they're a hot shot, and then hey, you go straighten them up. You go make sure that they understand where their place is on that team.
Yes,
I think that's all that's going on.
Yeah. You're going to get tested when you're the new person on the team, and it's up to you to carve out your role on that team.
That's right. And find your place. That's right.
That's right.
Where you fit.
Right. And show them how you can contribute, and then the stuff will kind of let up with you. But you can't come in there taking over with all these accolades and stuff.
And I'll be, in fairness to her, and I don't think she's tried to do that or said that, but it's all these Stephen A. Smiths and all these people over here who, who did he play for? Parker or Holman High School or somebody? West End. So I agree with both of you guys. I don't think that she's been treated unfairly, and I think that she'll find her way, but she's got to find her way.
Yeah.
Just kind of the way it is, I can remember, being redshirted, and even though you're on the team, you're not playing in any of the games, and it makes you just feel a little awkward, because you're on the team, but you're not playing.
Right.
And so if you went around complaining about why you're not playing, then you would just cause bad feelings on that team. Now, she's not doing that.
Right.
It's people around her who are doing that. These commentators. So Barkley had some stuff to say, and Stephen A. Smith had some stuff to say, and so on and so forth. So anyway, hopefully she'll be fine.
I think so.
She will.
Yeah. So what'd you think about the guy turning down the Laker job?
Do you blame him?
I don't think he was going to go in the first place.
I didn't either.
No, I don't.
I mean, think about this, Tom. Darvin Ham, he's been there 2 years, had a 5-year contract, right? His first year, he took him to the Western Conference Finals.
Right.
Okay. Now this year, he got him into the playoffs again.
Mm-hmm.
And you're playing with a part-time Anthony Davis, who is as soft as tissue paper. Every time he hit the floor, you're scared he's hurt. Okay. You have to put LeBron on manageable time,
right?
Because he will be 40 this year, so he needs a little time to bounce back. He is human, even though he's LeBron James. But you look at the rest of the supporting cast, you got people that may show up and may not show up. So it's nothing to work with.
Right.
And then he look at what happened to Darvin Ham. Why did they get rid of Darvin Ham? Why?
Well, and you can go back past Darvin Ham
Yes.
for the 6 coaches. I think the
Yeah.
longest one a 2-year term.
I was going to say, none of them have had a long tenure at the Lakers head coach.
Well,
so,
the guy that won the championship with him inside the bubble, Frank
right.
Vogel,
Yeah,
they got rid of him like
exactly.
2 years later after he won the championship. So
I was shocked they got rid of Darvin Ham.
I did too.
Unless there's some stuff going on with LeBron or Anthony Davis or whomever that we don't know about.
That's what I've heard. That's what I've heard.
Okay.
But if you're looking at it from a strictly coach's standpoint, you're looking at that team, you're going to say that team didn't have anybody but LeBron and AD is all they had. Those other people, one person one night may show up and give you about 15. The next night, somebody else may give you 10, but you can't count on anybody else. And that team was really horrible when it came to talent. I think they over-accomplished. I think they exceeded expectations to get as far as they did, to be honest.
This year.
I think he went out, the coach went out and he talked to the Lakers because, hey, it's the Lakers and they want to talk to me, so I'm going to go see what they're saying.
Right.
And the money, I mean, he's already making a lot of money.
Yeah.
So why would you put yourself in that position? And I wasn't surprised he didn't take it. I didn't.
There's a lot of people saying, he should have taken it with NIL and the transfer portal and all that. Nothing's guaranteed at UConn either. So, but at least you pretty much have your job security there. He knows he probably can sit there as long as he wants to.
And if you get fired at UConn,
he can go somewhere else.
Come back to the games. You could still be a hero because you won all these championships.
Yes.
You get fired at the Lakers.
They may give you 2 years. Right. And who's to say he's going to get along with the players there? They may not like him. What if LeBron doesn't like him and he plays, he doesn't want to play for him, and that's why he may leave. So they may fire him after a year if he's not meshing with the players.
That's true.
That's a risk he would be taking if he left.
And he's a college coach and he gets away with it.
Right.
Screaming at the kids and fussing with the kids on the side. And who is he going to do that with LeBron? Is he going to do that with Anthony Davis? Who is he going to do that with on the Lakers? You got to find the guy. It's like when the Cleveland Browns back in the old days, when Paul Brown, the coach, would get pissed off because Jim Brown was always late. And they would be on the bus and they'd have to wait on Jim Brown. And so he would send somebody to go get Jim Brown. And then when they came back with Jim Brown, he fussed at the guy who went to get Jim Brown. He would fuss at Jim Brown.
Hey, Tom, that's funny. It reminds me of a story I heard with Robert Ory from Alabama that when he was with the Lakers with Phil Jackson, he had just gotten or wherever he went to first when he got in the league. And the coach was talking and said, "Boy, so and so." Robert Ory stood up and said, "I'm not your damn boy." He walked out.
Wow. What was he, Rob? What they call him?
Big Shot Bob.
Big Shot Bob, yeah.
Big Shot Rob, I think, yeah.
Anyway, well, let's move on. We don't have a G-list guest today. We do have a G-list guest today. We don't have, but got a minute. Sean had some issues with her computer and so on and so forth. So we'll look forward to seeing her next week. And let's go to our G-list guest. Hollywood's got the A-list, and here on Tuesdays with Tom, we have the G-list. And our G-list guest today is Diana Roman. She is the Chief Operating Officer of My Black Ancestry and a descendant of the largest slave-owning family in American history. Let's join us as Diana shares her upcoming book, The Nine Epiphanies on Race, which unravels the complex fabric of America's past. Good morning.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, we're fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
I don't know where we even start. So tell us where you started.
Well, a lot of people wonder why I do this kind of work. And I discovered 15 years ago that my mother's family owned the most slaves in U.S. history. there was a book written about the family about 30 years ago called The Hairstons in Black and White, and it won a lot of awards. And Henry Weinsick wrote the book, and he documented all the history of the family. They owned 42 plantations and over 10,000 slaves. They rarely sold their slaves and had them live in family units, which resulted in really large families. So it wasn't unusual that they had 14 to 18 children in a family. And they documented all the marriages and the deaths and the births. And these records can provide, just my family records alone can provide ancestry to about 4 million people today. So when I discovered this 15 years ago, I contacted one of my cousins and said, well, this is Ancestry. This is the holy grail of African-American ancestry, and we need to do something. And so he introduced me to Sharon Leslie Morgan, who had just founded Our Black Ancestry. And I've been working with Sharon for the last 15 years, trying to get our family records online and searchable. And very happy to finally announce after 15 years that the Mormon Church has committed to putting our records online. Have y'all heard of the 10 million names, 10 million faces project?
No,
I have not.
They just released it back in August, and it's a huge project for the Mormon Church. A lot of huge foundations are behind it as well. And it's basically a project for anybody that was enslaved in our country. If they want to find their ancestry, we'll be able to find them in this project.
Wow.
And it's the Family Search is the genealogy company for the Mormon Church. And they've committed that the Hairston records are going to be documented within that project. So probably in about a year and a half, anybody that's descended from our plantations will be able to find all their records online.
Wow.
How did you feel when you found out that?
Sick to my stomach, just horrified. And I had read it in the book. What really inspired me is I was watching Dr. Gates' Finding Your Roots. You're familiar with his show?
Yes.
And he was doing a series about African-American celebrities. And every time he would get to 1870, which is something in the genealogy world we call the brick wall, because in 1870 is the first time African-Americans are captured as people.
Right.
Prior to that, they're captured in slave schedules and not considered people. And so he kept saying to people, well, sorry, this is as far as we go with the paper trail for African-Americans. There are no records for you beyond this. And it just kept nagging me. And it was like, well, wait a minute. No, I read in this book that Henry wrote about our family. There are records. They're slave records. And so I got in my car and I drove up to Chapel Hill and checked out some of these records, because all the family donated all of these records to University of North Carolina Southern Historical Collection. And I checked out some of these ledgers and opened them up, and it was just sickening. It was a hard thing to see. I was shaking and I cried, and it was a horrific thing, because these ledgers, there's 15 of them, and the way that all of them are mapped out, they're basically estate inventories. So the first third is all the jewelry and the china and the crystal. The second third is the cows, pigs, and chickens. And the last third is called the list of Negroes. And it's all these people. It's just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, father, mother, children, their ages, and then their values. And there's 15 of these ledgers that are all laid out the same way. And it was very, very difficult to look at that and reconcile that those were my ancestors, And so that's what's led me down so many rabbit holes to try to understand, to try to process, how could I be descended from this? How could they have done this? How could they have, enslaved someone and then taken them to church and sat next to them on the pew? How could they enslave someone and have them live in their house cooking their food? It just made no sense to me in the beginning. So that's what's driven me to really, really study race and understand, what happened during slavery, but then what happened after slavery, and why is it not fixed today?
Barbara, you got a question?
Yeah, this is just mind blowing, Diana. As I was reading your information, so we found out 15 years ago. Is this something your parents shared with you, or just in the reading that book that you found out about your family owning this many slaves, and how far it went back? And
Well, I've always gone up to the plantation since I was a little child, because that's where the family cemetery is. And so every time there was a family funeral, we went to the farm. They always
Yeah.
called it the farm. I knew it was a plantation. I didn't understand the size and the scope of the business until 15 years ago. I knew they grew tobacco. I knew that there was a slave cabin at the farm, but I didn't really understand that they owned 42 plantations and they were the largest. And you have to understand that generation in white culture, they didn't talk about it. It was impolite to talk. I'm literally the first person in our family that's speaking openly. Even people in my generation were horrified that I started speaking openly about the history. It's just how they've processed, 150 years later. It seems crazy. They still don't want to talk about it. It's impolite. That's a Southern way to put it. It's impolite. And I've been told that many times, Diana, what you're doing is impolite.
In what ways do they consider it? I mean, how do they consider it impolite to talk about it? To impolite to them, or impolite to the descendants of the slaves? I'm confused.
It's impolite to talk about transgressions of your ancestors. They all know it was wrong, but they don't. Silence to me is complicit.
Absolutely.
And that's how they perpetuate the cognitive dissonance of what happened.
Okay.
And I'm not going to participate in the complicits. I'm not going to pretend it away to another generation. The reason I really got compelled to do this work, I have 3 boys. I have 3 white males, which is tough in this society these days. It's
right.
They're demonized. They're the villains. They're blamed for everything wrong in our society when it comes to race. And they've done nothing. They've done nothing to contribute to the evils of today. And if I don't talk about it, they're going to inherit that legacy. And I want them to inherit something different.
Right.
So that's why I do the work that I do.
Right. And you mentioned that the slaves that your family owned, they were in 3 states. What states were those?
Virginia, North Carolina, and Mississippi.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
Michael?
Diane, first of all, let me just say thank you for being here. Also, I want to certainly say I admire your courage.
Yes.
To stand up and do this. And you talk quite openly and frank about certain issues here. And I want to get to those. But the first one is when you say that your family owned the largest plantation, how was that determined? Because I know there were a lot of other plantations. Was it somewhere where you had a bean counter somewhere? How did that come about? And how were you able to determine that your family had the largest slave ownership enterprise?
So Henry documented it. The guy that wrote the book about the family, he documented that there were 42 plantations. So we didn't have one plantation. It was 42 different plantations, and that there were 10,000 people documented to have been through those plantations. There's also a resource called Masters of the House, which is a book written by a professor from University of Mississippi. And he lists and documents all the slave owning families in the South. And by the way, there were lots of slave owning families in the North, which is a whole different rabbit hole. But just for the purposes of your question, he documents everybody from the people that own the most down to the least. And the Hairston's were the number 1. But if you just took the top 12 slave owning families that he's documented, those top 12 families owned a third of all the people that were enslaved.
Mm.
So just 12 families in the South owned a third of the people that were enslaved. That's how skewed it was during plantation and antebellum times.
Sounds like the mafia. Sounds like the mafia right there. Let me ask you this question, because a lot of people deny this fact. People like myself, I know it's a fact. You mentioned white privilege. So I'm going to ask you, is it real?
Yes, absolutely. It's real. Yes.
Why is it that so many people want to deny it, but
they don't know they have it? Like, and I say this to my white friends, if you don't think you have white privilege, you do. You don't know. It's like going up to a fish tank and asking the fish, how's the water?
Yeah.
You know, the fish is going to say, what's water?
Mm-hmm.
I was born into this tank. I've always had water. I breathe in, I breathe out. I don't know that water is a privilege. And I'll give you an example of a personal example of white privilege. When I was growing up, I grew up in Sandy Springs in Atlanta, and my mother suffered from a lot of mental illness, which is part of what she was descended from, which is a whole different rabbit hole. But we grew up very poor, and money was a problem, and she was very ill, and my parents were divorced, and my childhood was really, really, really difficult. But it wasn't difficult because of the color of my skin. It was just difficult. And I poured myself into the Atlanta Ballet, and my ballet instructor, the leader of the school, it just took to me, and she knew that my home life was really, really bad. And she cast me as the main character in the Nutcracker. And I mean, I deserved it. I was talented, but I think it was a deciding factor that she was soft-hearted for me, because she knew that would really make my childhood better. And so I got cast as Clara in the Nutcracker. If I had been African American, she could have never done that. It was 1973. And as much as she would have loved me or seen talent, if I had black skin, she could not have bestowed me with that honor and that privilege. Atlanta would have never tolerated a black Clara in 73. Now they would, maybe. I don't even know that now.
Right.
But that white skin allowed me to be given that leg up.
That's interesting. You just said
It
that. Go ahead,
is.
Tom.
No, I was just going to say, so your upcoming book, The Nine Epiphanies on Race, can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, so it's basically the 9 biggest lessons that I've learned about race since I've been doing this work. And they're aha moments, they're things that most people don't know. For instance, the first one is about the 13th Amendment. So the 13th Amendment, freed everybody from slavery. But there's a caveat at the end of that amendment that says, however, if you're found committing a crime, then you can be re-enslaved. And over the next 80 years, a third of the people that had been emancipated were actually re-enslaved in different slave camps, in bondage contracts, whatever. But as soon as that law was passed, and remember the Southern Confederate states were not in Congress when they created this amendment.
Right.
So they had no say-so in it. So the North passes this amendment, then they hand it to the Confederate South. Wink, wink, nod, nod. There's a caveat. You can re-enslave people if you need to rebuild the South. And so the South went out and vigorously enforced the caveat. They created new laws. The 3 main ones they actually enforced were vagrancy, loitering, and trespassing. Well, as soon as a slave steps off their plantation, they're guilty of all 3.
Mm-hmm.
So they're guilty of being picked up and thrown into these slave labor camps to rebuild the South. They even created ridiculous laws. Like one was that they would be arrested for selling their vegetables after dusk. Well, dusk is not a finite piece of time.
Right.
So when does dusk begin and when does dusk end, right? There's also a law that was on the Georgia books that said you'd be arrested for speaking louder than the softest white woman in your vicinity. Well, what's a vicinity? No. So many people were rearrested and thrown into these horrible slave labor camps where there's no accountability. All you had to do was say why you arrested the person. And beyond that, there was no accountability for feeding, clothing, caring for them, and then no death records if they die. And they literally worked them to death because they'll just go out and round up some more people. There was no accountability for what happened to people. And they never came out of these slave labor camps. It was horrific.
It's for life.
Oh, yeah. And the saddest thing about these slave labor camps is a third of the population that went through these camps were 16-year-old or younger. Children.
So what do you think about today when we have politicians who don't want people taught what you're teaching, what you're talking about? You can't talk about this in school because it makes the children feel bad. That maybe their ancestors weren't good people, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a chapter in the book that's all about trauma and talks about trauma because Sharon and I from our Black Ancestry, as we have done this work over the years, inevitably when you get somebody to the brick wall and then you discover their ancestors in slavery, it's very traumatic. It's very upsetting. And so we decided to go back to school and learn about what is trauma, what is historical harm, and how do we heal from it. And Eastern Mennonite University has a program called STAR Training, which stands for Strategies for Trauma Awareness and Resilience. They created this program in response to 9/11 because they're Mennonites, and Mennonites are peace builders. And they knew we were going to war after the planes went through the towers, but they wanted to pave a path back to peace. And so but basically their training says that the only way you can get back to peace is through truth. You have to start with truth. There's 4 steps you have to take. It's truth, empathy, forgiveness, and then love. And it has to be those 4 things, and it has to be in that order. We're never going to heal unless we talk about what really happened. We have to have truth. And it's not about blame. I don't believe in blame, shame, or guilt, because all of those concepts are designed to shut us down and divide us. We're not going to get anywhere blaming anybody. Who are we going to blame? So it's important to tell the truth. It's important for people to understand what really happened. And I tell people, because there's a chapter in the book about Reconstruction, if you just go and study the 14 years of Reconstruction and what happened in our country, you will understand why we are so messed up about race today. All the seeds about racism today are from Reconstruction and slavery, but mostly Reconstruction.
Well, that leads me into the question I was going to ask, where you said the hidden truths behind Reconstruction. So can you give us an example of what you're talking about, those seeds that were planted?
So in Reconstruction, they promised 14 acres and a mule, right? And so it was Grant that claimed his victory and told everybody they were getting 14 acres and a mule. And he was basing that on his military training, that when you're the victor of a war, you get to claim the spoils. It was challenged by a family in Hilton Head who wanted their property back, and he had already given it away. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And they basically said that rule, the spoils of war, doesn't apply in a civil war. If we had conquered Japan or Germany or Mexico, you can apply that rule, but you can't do that in a civil war because the Southerners are still covered under the same Constitution, which gives them their property rights. So that's why all that land that had been given away, some of it had been given away, was given back to the white owners because they were protected under the same Constitution.
So it's interesting that in this conversation you brought up the Constitution and the amendments and stuff. And I have a very good friend that says when the Constitution was written, it didn't have Black people in mind.
Exactly.
And what you're saying right now verifies what he always says.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Was it at the 3/5 rule or something afterward?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, I attended a meeting last week, and this guy he's a guy that ran for Senate, and he's trying to bring more minorities and Black people over to the Republican Party. And he made the comment that he has something that the Republicans can sell, which is the Second Amendment to right to bear arms. And I sat there and I looked at him. I said, well, that wasn't meant for us, because as an upstanding citizen, law-abiding Black man, if I have a gun, I don't get the same privilege as my white counterpart does with a gun. I get shot first, and then they find out I was legally carrying a gun, legally licensed to carry a gun, and I didn't have a record and all that, but that's after they shot me. Mm-hmm. And so I was saying that argument doesn't make sense to do that. It would be better to make it on economics. But you've just verified this discussion I had with my friend about the Constitution.
Yeah. Well, if you look back at history, I think it was 14 of our presidents were slave owners.
Yes.
They don't talk about George Washington, the slave owner. Thomas
Right.
Jefferson. Well, they do talk about Thomas Jefferson, but when they put together the Constitution, they were all a bunch of white men that were slave owners.
Yes.
What do you think about reparations?
It's interesting. When I first joined Our Black Ancestry, we did a survey about that, and 94% of the people that responded to our survey, should we have reparations, said no. And this was 100% Black people that were responding to the survey. And we asked them to expand on that. And they said you're rewarding people that were not directly harmed, and you're punishing people that didn't do the deed. And so it to me, how do you go back and enforce that with so many? We're 7 generations beyond that. How do you go back and create justice? And so in my mind, it was like, well, I'm just going to do this work, and that's my form of reparations. I'm going to do whatever I can to heal and to get these records in the right place, because that's something I know I can do as an ancestor 7 generations beyond.
I hear what you're saying, and I can follow that logic, but at the same point, those of us here are still suffering the atrocities of how this country was put together. They want to get rid of DEI right now. Mm-hmm. Okay? You have elected officials that are getting rid of DEI because they think it's only going to benefit all Black people. It benefits people that are disabled. So on one side, I can understand that, but on the other side, there are atrocities and discrimination and bias that's still going along right now every day. And they're doing it the same subtle way that you talked about. So what gives?
In the way that I look at that, anytime race is politicized, it's a divisive tool. It shouldn't be. First of all, race isn't real. It's a man-made construct to divide us. It's not DNA. You can't trace it in your genes that you're white or Black, or that's not a real thing. It's a political tool, and it's designed to make us dislike each other, fear each other, and not operate in one union. And one of the best examples of that is the chapter that I wrote about the Black Panther Party. The Black Panther Party was one of the most successful American phenomenons we've ever had. And it's because they brought everyone together. The Rainbow Coalition, they brought everyone together, and they started fixing the social ills. They created food banks, free vaccines, school lunches, school breakfast. And the misnomer about the Black Panther Party is that they were evil Black men with machine guns, and they were dangerous, and we were to fear them. But the reality was that 73% of the party were actually female.
Mhm.
And there were actually some white members that were part of that. And they brought in the Hispanics and the people from Western Virginia, the Appalachian people. And they brought everyone together. And where did they get money for the food banks and the vaccines? That was from white America. It was from the people in their local communities donated these services and these goods to fix what was broken. And so what happened to the Black Panther Party? They were annihilated. They were murdered. They were infiltrated by the FBI. And it's because it was working.
Right.
Right. And so it's very politically motivated to create the concept of race and to create race to divide us. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Very
I
much
hear you. I
So
guess-
Diane, when is your book going to be published? When will it be released?
I'm hoping next summer. The author that is writing it with me, her name is Angela Dodson, and she's just recently released a book called "We Refuse to Be Silent," and it's getting picked to be Editor's Choice, Critics Award, all this kind of stuff. And the book that "We Refuse to Be Silent" is written. It's 35 essays written by Black women, documenting, giving personal stories about how Black men and their families have been wronged by systemic racism or social injustice. The big heavy hitters, y'all know Isabel Wilkerson?
I'm not familiar with her.
So she's the first African-American that won a Pulitzer Prize. And she's written a book called Caste, and Apple Movies
Yes.
just wrote a
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Isabel. So she's got a chapter in there. Donna Brazil has a chapter in there. My partner, there you go. There you go.
Yeah,
Great
Michael
movie,
gave
by
me
the way.
this. One of my good friends gave me this, and I'm just starting to read it. So.
Oh, it's so good. It's mind blowing. It's so good.
Okay.
And my business partner at Our Black Ancestry has a chapter in the book.
Okay. Well, I will start. I'll start.
Yeah, it's good. It's We Refuse to Be Silent. And so Angela and I met at a Black Hairston reunion. And they call themselves the Black Hairstons. I'm not being derogatory. Anybody descended from any of the Hairston plantations, they have these family reunions every year. And I've been invited for 10 years, but I have 3 boys and they all played travel sports. And when they would do these reunions, I was always at a tournament. But then I had this break in time where I was free to go, and I went and I met Angela at this reunion, and we just really hit it off. And I posted a blog on Facebook, and people over the years have always said, you need to write a book. You need to write a book. So I posted this blog and said, what do y'all think? Should I write a book? And she saw it, and she picked up the phone and called me, and she said, you need to write a book. I said, but I'm not an author. And she says, I am, and we're going to write it together. And she is descended from the slaves, from the Hairstons, and I'm descended from the slave owners.
Wow.
So we have 2 more chapters to finish, and then I think her current editor is going to pick it up. They've heard the concept and they're excited about it, and I think it's the whole purpose of the book is to show people what happened historically, and show people that we can move forward, we can heal.
Yes.
If you don't believe racial healing is possible, it will never, ever, ever happen. But if you do believe it can happen, then we can start making those baby steps and make it happen. I mean, we can literally make it happen overnight. Y'all were talking about the sports star for the NBA, and it reminded me about, y'all remember that playoff game where the player got spearheaded into the chest and he was knocked out on the field. He actually died twice in the field.
Yes.
Something Hamlin, I can't remember.
Yeah.
Darius Hamlin. And then what happened? What happened at that moment in time? Everybody stood up. Everybody held hands. All the players kneeled, and everybody prayed. Did somebody go on a loudspeaker and instruct them to do that? No. We all know where we're from, right? We all know how to connect. And when it's important, we all know what to do. But we just choose not to because we're being told to do other things.
Yeah.
But instantaneously, we could make it happen if we choose it. And that's what happened that day.
Yeah.
I just have one last question. I think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear you because of your position on white privilege. What do you say to people that says there's no such thing as systemic racism?
Well, the best way to really explain to a white person that there is white privilege is to tell them, don't answer me because they get very defensive. And I was, when you're a fish in the fish tank, you don't know there's water. If you were to be born tomorrow and you could choose, you could tell God how to create you, and you could choose your skin color, and you have to live in America, would you choose white or would you choose black? Don't answer me, because I don't want to hear your condescending, oh, I'd choose black because I'm so woke. No, I know what you would choose, and you know what you would choose.
Yes.
And if you know what you would choose and it's white, it's because you know choosing black would come with consequences.
Right.
That's white privilege.
And it also says systemic racism is real.
There
Oh,
are
yes.
also people who would say, man, you're so lucky. You just got a great life and so on and so forth. And I would say, well, would you want to change places with me?
Right.
And they wouldn't answer. I know the answer. Don't worry. I'm not going to call you out. You don't have to answer.
Yeah. Well, and I saw this great meme on Facebook, I don't know, 10 years ago, but it said, bad things happen to everybody, but bad things can happen to you, to black people, strictly because of the color of their skin. Mm-hmm. And white people pull that out. Well, I had a rough childhood and I've had all these problems. That's fine. We all have problems. Right. But those things that were bad that happened to you didn't happen to you strictly
because you were black.
Your skin.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where we've got to be truthful. Right. And we've got to move forward from that and realize, my partner Sharon at Our Black Ancestry, in the middle of the summer, she's come to my lake house. I'm darker than she is. She's a very light-skinned black woman. And I'm like, this is, I'll put my hand up to her, next to hers and go, this is ridiculous that skin color dictates how we're treated. I've got darker skin and I've got more privilege.
And the thing that it makes it really hard on parents. And I can remember my dad telling me what I had to do or not do as a young man, mm-hmm. Even though I hadn't done anything, but you can't go over there. Don't do that. Or you got to be careful. And they used to have this one affluent neighborhood in Birmingham. They used to always say, if you get caught driving through there, you better make sure you got a lawnmower or a shovel or something in your car to tell them you're on your way to do some work.
Well, it still happens today because my son Cooper, who's 21, was playing lacrosse in high school, and his best friend was a black child named Jabari. And I was with Jabari's mom. We were meeting them at a tournament, and they had gone to get a meal, and they were coming back. And they were both approaching the field, both wearing hoodies with the hoodies on, both on their iPhones, completely distracted, walking towards the field. And Jabari's mother went crazy, went running over, ripped that hoodie off his head, berated him, yelled at him. I have told you 1,000 times, do not do that. And I'm just standing there shocked going, well, Cooper's wearing a hoodie. I didn't get it. And she looked at me, she goes, you don't understand. You don't understand. A black child in a hoodie is going to be treated differently than a white child in a hoodie. And it dawned on me, oh my God, she was totally right. And that happened, 6 years ago?
Right.
Yeah.
Mm.
This is a very interesting conversation.
It is.
I'm looking forward to your book. And maybe we can follow up on this conversation at a later time. But thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah. Diane, thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your courage.
Yes.
Yeah, very much so.
Oops. Thank you all for having me. Sorry, my puppy's about to get on screen.
It's okay.
Wants to talk, wants to be involved. Okay, well, anything else? Diana, thank you. You got anything else you want to share before we go?
No, just, I just really hope that that anybody that's watching this really thinks long and hard, how they treat each other,
Yeah.
and choose love. Don't choose
Yes.
fear. Don't be indoctrinated. Don't let your government or the media tell you how to treat your fellow man.
They
Just
had,
choose
there,
love.
there was a thing on the other day, and I can't remember what it was on, but they showed clips of George Wallace, and they showed clips of Wallace talking to masses of people, and it just was so typical of the conversations that some of these politicians have today, where it's just all about division, all about telling people who don't know any, ignorant people, what they should or shouldn't think, and who's doing something to you, and who's coming into this country, and what they're going to do when they get in here, and so on and so forth. And if you go back and look at the history, everybody here, probably except for the slaves, for the descendants of slaves, were immigrants.
Right.
Everybody came from somewhere else. So I don't know. It's interesting, but
Have y'all ever been to the Legacy Museum in Montgomery?
yes.
Yes.
So
have.
that section when you come in and it's all the politicians in the 60s and the 70s is just so mind blowing, because I was a
Yes.
little girl when Lester Maddox and George Wallace and
Yeah.
Herman
Yes.
Talmadge, and it just blows my mind that I actually lived in a
Yes.
time period where they spoke so openly racist
Mhm.
Yeah.
and were elected for being openly racist.
Yes.
And it's
Yep.
just we've come a long way, but gosh, we've got so much further to go.
Yeah, we do.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And,
Thank you.
oh, very interesting. Very interesting. Let's go. Okay. My closing comment for today is to wish an early happy Father's Day to all my friends who are dads. Manuel, Stefan, Virgil, Michael O, Michael G, Michael W. I know a lot of Michaels. Sam H, Sam J, Dixon J, and the many, many others who make things work daily for their families. Sorry if I didn't call your name. I appreciate you. And as always, I remember my dad, who I consider a champ. I couldn't have asked for anything more. I never had to look outside of our home for a hero because he was right there in our home every day. And so happy Father's Day to all of you guys out there that make things happen for your families. And that's our show for today. I want to thank the audience. We appreciate you. Thank our G-List guest, Diana Roman. Thank our sponsor, Best Girl Inc. Thanks again to the TWT team, Barbara, Sean, Emily, Michael, and Joyce. And that's it on this June 11th. Remember, a day without a smile is a day wasted. If you've got an extra one, give one to someone else today. Enjoy yourself. Make every day count. Stay safe. Peace.